Ah yes, for as long as humanity has existed, we have been asking questions that seem impossible to answer. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Why do we park on driveways and drive on parkways? Is the dress blue and black or white and gold? And of course, who is Tom Bombadil? But here's the thing. After thinking about this question long and hard, I came to the realization that this isn't an age-old question, because age-old questions don't have an answer, but this one does. That's right, Tom Bombadil's identity is plain to see, and Tolkien revealed it decades ago. However, fans of Middle-earth have been willingly turning a blind eye to this obvious revelation in hopes that one of their many theories may come true instead. Because the reality is, Tolkien's answer to this question isn't one we like. But why? Well, in today's video, we're going to cover all of this and much more as I take you through the origin of Tom Bombadil, the top fan theories regarding his identity, and finally, the cold hard fact of who he really is. My name is Gibby, and welcome to my channel, Fact or Fantasy, a place where we discuss Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, analyzing lore, characters, and more each and every week. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you might know that a few weeks ago, I put out a video discussing the top myths and unanswered questions in the Lord of the Rings community. As a joke, I cut the video off before revealing Tom Bombadil's true identity. Well, that sparked a whole bunch of comments regarding this exact question, and so it inspired me to dig deep and figure out what really is going on with this whole conspiracy, and why Bombadil is such a trigger word for Tolkien fans. And by the end of the video today, I think we'll find out that my video from a couple weeks back was more accurate than you'd think, but we'll get to that later. To start things off today, we first need to dive into the true origin of Tom himself, which I think is unknown to many Lord of the Rings fans. And by the way, if you're watching this, I'm just assuming you know who Tom is. This video isn't about who he is and the role he plays in the Fellowship of the Ring, it's about his deeper lore and meaning in Middle-earth. So if you're totally lost right now and need filled in, pause this and go read chapters 6, 7, and 8 of the Fellowship of the Ring. Anyway, back to the program here, let's jump into Tom's origin. You see, many people start this conversation in completely the wrong mindset. They immediately base all of their theories and presumptions on who they read about in those chapters that I just mentioned, when in reality, Tom came into being more than 20 years prior to the release of The Lord of the Rings. You see, before he was written down on paper, Tom was the figment of Tolkien's imagination, or should I say the imagination of his children, as one of his kids, Michael, had a Dutch doll named Tom Bombadil. According to Humphrey Carpenter's 1977 biography of Tolkien, this doll was the inspiration behind the look of this legendary character, and the stories originally began as Tolkien would invent fantastical adventures to tell his children regarding the doll, and a couple of those adventures even made it to print years later. That's right, while I'm sure Tolkien was thinking of stories in his head regarding the One Ring and Frodo many years before, Tom Bombadil was one of the first publications from Tolkien. While a book titled The Adventures of Tom Bombadil was published in 1962, Tolkien first released a poem under the same title in 1934 through the Oxford Magazine. Around that same time, he wrote another poem titled Bombadil Goes Boating, but that wasn't published until the 1962 release. So as you can see, Bombadil was on Tolkien's mind way before the release of The Lord of the Rings, and he wasn't invented purely for that world, as he existed in the minds of Tolkien's children many years before. So hang on to that thought, because it will greatly impact Tolkien's later words on this matter, and our final answer to the question at hand. But before we get there, we need to do our due diligence and look into the big three theories surrounding this character, because like I said in the beginning of this video, fans have been denying Tolkien's answer for decades and inventing their own origins for Bombadil instead. First up, we have the Ainur theory. For those of you who don't know, the Ainur were divine spirits who helped create the world, and they were the first beings created by Eru Ilúvatar. The Valar and the Maiar are a part of the Ainur, and some believe that Tommy B is in this elite group. Why? Well, there are a few reasons fans give for this claim. First, we have Bombadil's incredible age. As he states himself, he is eldest. The elves even name him Iarwain Ben Adar, which means oldest and fatherless. Tom himself even tells us that he remembers the first raindrop and was there before the Dark Lord came. The second supporting point for this claim is his power over nature. We know that the Valar and Maiar were indeed powerful, specifically when it came to the creation of the world and nature itself. Third, Tom is always singing. He practically doesn't speak without singing, and considering the fact that Tolkien's entire legendarium is built off of music, it would make sense that Tom is a divine spirit. Finally, the fourth pillar to this argument comes from Robert Foster's Complete Guide to Middle-earth, in which he describes Tom as a Maya gone native. This version of the theory guesses that Tom was a Maya who came to Middle-earth separate from the Istari, who were deliberately sent by the Valar to counteract Sauron. Instead of involving himself in cosmic affairs, Tom settled down and chose to live a simple life, which would explain his power, but his disinterest in the larger conflicts surrounding him. Now, all of these supporting points sound good, but they slightly miss the mark for a few reasons, which is why I can confidently debunk this theory. To start, there is a fatal chronological problem here, which is that Tom's age claims actually contradict the Ainur timeline. Tom claims that he was there before the Dark Lord came from the outside. Now, regardless of which Dark Lord this is, it doesn't make sense. Either way, Tom makes it sound like he existed before the Ainur themselves, or at least outside of the Ainur. Melkor and Sauron are among the Ainur, so if Tom was there before them, he really can't be one of their equals. But if that's not enough, we also have the ring itself, which completely throws out this Ainur theory. As we know, Gandalf refused to touch the One Ring, for fear of how it might control him. Saruman falls to the ring, and Sauron, although by his own doing, is bound to it. So how then did Tom grab the ring, toss it in the air, and put it on his finger, and be totally unaffected by it? Considering Gandalf, Saruman, and Sauron are all Maiar in different forms, that means Tom cannot be on their same level. And by the way, there are more reasons this theory doesn't work, but those two alone break the system. So why do people love this idea? Well, it's neat and clean. It fits Tom into Tolkien's existing hierarchy, and you don't have to think outside the box to believe it. But let's move on now because we still got a few more theories to discuss. Theory number 2 takes us a little further outside the box than the Ainur theory, as it states that Tom is a grand spirit, or a genius loci. Probably saying that wrong, by the way, but it means spirit of a place in Latin. This theory claims that Tom is one of two things. He could either be the local spirit of the Old Forest itself, which explains why he stays in that location, or he is the grand spirit of the entirety of Middle-earth/Arda. This theory primarily comes from multiple Tolkien scholars who have compared Tom to the classical Roman mythological belief system of a place having an overall spirit. And there are a few things that support this idea. First and foremost is of course the geographical limitations that Tom Bombadil seems to have, as he does not leave his land. In classical mythology, genius loci were bound to a specific place that they would represent, and they couldn't exist outside of it. Another point to this is that Goldberry titles him Master of Wood, Water, and Hill. And on top of that, Tolkien himself said some things in his letters that could provide evidence for this. In letter 19, Tolkien described Tom as the spirit of the vanishing Oxford and Berkshire countryside. And while all of that seems to reinforce that local spirit idea, what about the theory of a grand spirit? There are a couple supporting points for this, one of which comes from Galdor in the books, as he says that, quote, "Power to defy our enemy is not in him, unless such power is in the earth itself." In saying this, Galdor is almost insinuating that Tom and the earth are one, which supports the grand spirit theory. And on top of this, some fans claim that there is a linguistic connection between Tom's title and Ea itself. Goldberry says that, quote, "He is," in response to the hobbits asking about Tom, and if Goldberry had been speaking in the Elvish dialect, "he is" would have actually translated to Ea, which is the name of the created universe itself. This could suggest that Tom is a spirit beyond the Old Forest or even Arda, and is actually the grand spirit of all creation, almost like the Holy Spirit to Eru the Father. So you might be thinking, all of this sounds great and pretty convincing. Why wouldn't this theory be correct? Well, sadly, just as there are supporting points, there are many contradictions and detractions as well. First would be Tom's fight against Old Man Willow. Although some may not classify this as a fight, there is still a sense that Tom doesn't have complete control over the tree, and we know that Old Man Willow hates everything that goes about freely, including Tom. If Tom was the incarnate spirit of the Old Forest, you would think that Old Man Willow would be a part of that spirit. In addition, Tom seems to have power beyond that of the forest and nature. Specifically, he banishes the Barrow Wights, which are undead spirits who came from outside of his land. Additionally, Tom sees through the ring's invisibility, which suggests a power outside of Arda or the Old Forest. And beyond those smaller locations, Tolkien debunked the idea that Tom was the spirit of Ea, as he explicitly rejected this theory. In letter 153, Tolkien clarifies that he is does not always carry divine significance. And even more than that, I'm not even sure if he is really directly translates to EA in Elvish. Rather, I think that's just a stretch from some fans. Finally, we have one more theory to address before we reveal Tom's true identity. And the final theory is a bit meta, but one that fans love to toy around with, and that is the idea that Tom Bombadil is Tolkien himself. Obviously not Tolkien in personality, but Tolkien in power, a character with complete control over the entire universe, but also a person who won't interfere with the story as it unfolds, someone who is watching from the outside. So let's go over the key points behind this theory. First, Tom's whole pre-existence thing is easily explained through this theory. Obviously, he exists before all else if he is Tolkien. Second, this would also explain why Tolkien was so evasive about this topic. If this character was a self-insert, it would make sense that Tolkien wouldn't want to share that information. If it was revealed that Tolkien inserted himself into the story, it would destroy the facade that this was a found manuscript, and that it was all written by the Hobbits. Now, even in those supporting points, we've named some of the counterpoints. First, Tolkien explicitly rejected the idea of self-insertion. If anything, Beren and Luthien are the closest characters to Tolkien's life, as it could be a story inspired by his own romance with his wife. Fun fact, by the way, J.R.R. and Edith Tolkien's gravestones bear the names Beren and Luthien on it. Anyway, another counterpoint that came up previously is the whole found manuscript thing. The idea is that Tolkien is separate from the work. Obviously, we all know the truth out here in the real world, but it ruins the fun for us if Tolkien inserted himself into the story. And finally, I already kind of mentioned it, but their personalities are not the same. Like, at all. I'm not claiming to have been best friends with Tolkien, but I don't think anyone here can disagree with me on this. Tom Bombadil has a very unique personality, and it isn't one that matches Tolkien. Now, with all of that being said, you might be thinking that we're right back where we started, with absolutely no answers. But actually, through analyzing the origin of Tom Bombadil and the theories surrounding this character, we've seen the answer. You know exactly who and what he is. But this is where we reveal the biggest mistake that Tolkien fans have been making for decades. You see, J.R.R. Tolkien is one of the greatest, if not the greatest author of all time. His world building is on another level, and as lovers of the lore, we've grown used to having questions and Tolkien providing the answers. I mean, seriously, there's an answer for pretty much everything in Tolkien's works, so it makes sense that it is frustrating for a Lord of the Rings fan when they don't know the answer to this mystery, which leads to the invention of theories like the ones we've covered in this video. But today, I'm going to fix that. Here is the identity of Tom Bombadil. He doesn't have one. Period. End of story. He isn't Eru, he isn't the spirit of the old forest, and he isn't a Maiar Gaunt native. Tom Bombadil was a toy that belonged to Tolkien's son, a toy that inspired countless bedtime stories and a special poem in the Oxford magazine. And when writing The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien knew that he had the answers for everything. He knew that he had thought out every detail, every possibility, and every potential plot hole in the story. So what is more intriguing, captivating, and fun for a perfectionist author than inserting an imperfection into their story? And what better imperfection than a character who is close to Tolkien's heart? Now let me be clear, I'm not saying that Tolkien wanted to bait millions of people into debating this topic for decades. In fact, he made it quite clear in his letters that people thought way too much about Tom Bombadil, even to the point of ignoring the entire meaning of The Lord of the Rings as a whole. And because of this frustration, Tolkien gave the answer. In his letters to colleagues, family, and readers, he explained that Tom Bombadil was an unknowable entity, a character intentionally created without an identity. As he says, all great mythologies need enigmas. They need things that cannot be understood. And when writing The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien realized that he had a flaw in his mythology. The flaw was that it was perfect. Like I said, he had thought of everything. So in order to give some mystery, he added the enigmatic Tom Bombadil. And by trying to dig to the bottom of this mystery, inserting your own opinions, beliefs, and ideas into the story, we're warping what Tolkien designed the character to be. While this might irritate other fans, the enigma that is Tom Bombadil brings me joy. I like that he is an unknowable entity, and I think that's the way Tolkien wanted it to be. And personally, I think that if Tolkien could see the chaos that Tom Bombadil would cause in the future, I don't think he would have included this character in the story. Because Tom is meant to bring some joy, hope, and mystery into the Lord of the Rings in a profoundly inexplicable way. As always, thank you to Jason, Joshua, and the rest of my incredible Patreon supporters who help make these videos possible. If you want early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and more, feel free to join using the link in the description. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.